Aurelia Hawk. I never thought the day would come when I'd stand before my own desk, watching someone else slide into my chair as if it belonged to them. But here I am, blinking against the glare of fluorescent lights in the downtown Chicago office I helped build from scratch. My hands hover over the warm keyboard, lingering on the keys that still carry the echoes of my late-night triumphs and the battles I fought to prove myself. It started 3 weeks ago, when Mr. Caldwell, my boss of 3 years, called me into his glass-walled corner office. The walls were decorated with framed photos of quarterly reports skyrocketing in profit, punctuated by staged shots of smiling employees who didn't know they were expendable. I steeled myself for a performance review. I was due for a raise, maybe a promotion. I almost laughed when he told me he was restructuring my role, then slid an envelope across the desk. Inside, a resignation letter I didn't write. My heart thumped so loudly I was certain he could hear it. "You're indispensable," he said with that oily grin. "But I need you to do me one last favor. Train your replacement." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. Train my replacement? Caldwell's favorites in the management circle always got the plum assignments. Never me. I had clawed my way up on merit, grit, and sleepless nights. I gave my blood and sweat, literally, during the Normandy office move project, when that building flooded and I pulled cables from ankle-deep water. But this wasn't just corporate politics. It was betrayal. That night, I sat at a dive bar 5 blocks south, nursing a bourbon and replaying every conversation, every email, every questionable smirk in the hallway. Why now? I pressured myself for an answer. Did a client complain? No. Did sales slip? Hardly. They were at an all-time high under my oversight, so it had to be personal. Caldwell wanted someone malleable, someone he could mold, control. My anger became fuel. Training someone would be a chance to expose his folly, to prove that no one could fill my shoes. I wasn't going to sabotage the new hire. I was going to teach her everything, every shortcut I discovered, every client nuance, every unspoken expectation. Then I'd watch Caldwell's empire crumble when his golden child failed. A week later, she arrived. Natalie Prescott, 27, fresh out of business school, with perfect posture and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She carried a matching notebook and color-coded pens, as if she were auditioning for a penthouse at the Trump Tower, not a cubicle on the 18th floor. "Hi, I'm Natalie," she said, offering a handshake. It felt like the collision of two worlds. Her clean syllabus textbooks against my dog-eared notebooks full of margin scribbles. "I'm your replacement, but Mr. Caldwell says you'll make the transition seamless. I'm so excited to learn from you." I looked at her, measured her enthusiasm. Then I smiled and said, "Welcome aboard. We have a lot to cover." For the next 3 days, I ran her through everything. Our 3 biggest clients, the pitfalls in our CRM system, how to push through Caldwell's unreasonable budget deadlines. I watched her furrow her brow as she took notes, and I felt a thrill, knowing every theory she jotted down, every rule she underlined would bend and break under real-world pressure. But the sweetest part was watching her crack. Natalie was spotless on paper but untested in crisis. On Thursday afternoon, a major client called with an emergency. Their site was down, and they needed a patch deployed within the hour. I explained step by step, but she froze, her hands shaking over the keyboard. The monitor glared back at her like a judge passing sentence. "Just do it," I urged, leaning over her shoulder. "Remember the suppression toggle, then the rollback script." Her eyes flicked to me, then back to the code. Sweat beaded on her lip. "I can't. I'm getting an error." I slammed my palm on the desk. "Serious clients don't wait. You made the promise." She swallowed hard, bit her lip, and typed. The system crashed again, harder this time. Alarms flashed. My phone rang. Caldwell's name on the screen. He wanted an update. I held my breath. The lines of code blurred. And then I did something I almost regretted. I reached down, hit the reset sequence I'd hidden in a file called backup_old, and watched as the server blinked back to life. "There," I said, tracing a finger through the air. "Now you do it next time." Natalie stared at the screen, wide-eyed. Caldwell's call dropped to voicemail. I walked away, leaving her to clean up the pieces. That night, I lay awake plotting. I would show Caldwell what real leadership looked like, how to anticipate disasters, to adapt on the fly, to inspire when stakes are highest. I'd give Natalie the tools to fail spectacularly, just enough for him to see the cracks. I didn't know he'd fire her on Monday. When I walked into his office and saw Natalie's box of belongings on the floor, I felt nothing. No triumph, no relief, only the low hum of fluorescent lights. Caldwell cleared his throat. Aurelia, she wasn't the right fit. I need you back at full capacity. I stared at him. So you think I'll stick around after this? He swallowed. I need you. Don't quit. I picked up the box. I looked at him, eyes cold. I won't. Not yet. But reward loyalty tends to fade fast in this place. He nodded, shifting uncomfortably. I understand. Let's move on. I turned and walked out, my pulse louder than any faint plea he might have made. Now I'm here, teaching the next soul who thinks this office is their destiny, because someone's going to come, and when they do, I'll be ready. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you. I flicked off the camera light and stared down at my reflection in the blank screen of my laptop. I'd just wrapped my invitation for the next story, but the adrenaline from recounting that betrayal still crackled through my veins. I dragged the laptop into the break room, where the hum of the vending machines felt more like a battlefield. I settled into a scuffed vinyl chair and stared at the microwave clock, 6:02 p.m. on a Tuesday, but in this place, time was as fluid as Caldwell's loyalty. Tomorrow, Natalie Prescott's replacement would arrive. They called her Elena Myers, an operations associate from Caldwell's alma mater, Northwestern. Another polished graduate, probably with a spotless resume and a fresh vision. Just what Caldwell needed to shape in his image. I took a deep breath. I'd spent the last 48 hours dissecting every misstep Prescott made, crafting lectures on corporate survival. Now it was time to test my plan further. When the elevator dinged and the doors slid open, Elena stepped onto the 18th floor like she owned it. She had ice blonde hair tied in a sleek bun, red heels that clicked like a metronome, and a Gucci tote rather than a tote bag. I grabbed my coffee, still warm, and held it out to her with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Welcome, Elena. I'm Aurelia Hawk. I'll be first on deck to get you up to speed. Her smile was crisp, rehearsed, but I could see curiosity glow behind it. She'd spotted the black button on my blazer, the discreet insignia of the project team, and she followed my gaze. I've heard about the Normandy rebuild, she said, nodding to the lapel pin I'd earned after the disaster recovery. Quite the legacy. My heart tightened at the mention of Normandy. That night when the pipes burst, I'd volunteered to dive into the crawl space, cable torch in hand, to reroute the network. I'd earned respect then, real respect. Now I'd wear that pin as both armor and weapon. Legacy's not enough in this business, I said, flipping open my planner. Let's start with the client list. You remember Apollo Technologies? She nodded, pulled out a sleek tablet, and synced it to our CRM. Her fingers flew over the screen, but I could see each login lag. Already, she was one step behind in muscle memory. For the next 3 hours, I guided her through the top 10 accounts, focusing on demands Caldwell never voiced but always expected. Eagle Dynamics needed weekly check-ins, not monthly. Hamilton Freight's invoices had a glitch on Tuesdays. OmniMed's CEO valued direct emails, not Slack messages. Each nuance was a bullet in my arsenal. Then, the real test arrived. It was noon, and the air in the trading room was thick with stress. A leak in the north wing had triggered the fire alarm. 4 sprinklers went off. The water dripped through the ceiling tiles, pooling on desks like a creeping tide. I grabbed Elena's arm. Safety protocols, now. She blinked. What, I barked out instructions. Evacuate the hallway, status the servers, and call the facilities manager, and get a mop. She froze, jaw tight. Then, as I watched, she sprinted into action, shouting at the admin assistant, the IT tech, grabbing the emergency phone. I let her take lead, but I stayed close, ready to correct every misstep. By the time the sprinkler was turned off and the alarms silenced, Elena had marshaled the troops. Papers were bagged, servers wrapped, Damage control was underway. She looked at me, panting. Not bad, I said. But did you notice? You forgot to verify the sprinkler zone with the alarm panel. If you hadn't, the backup system could have soaked the mainframe. Her eyes darted from me to the console. Then she nodded. I know, she said. I panicked. I put a hand on her shoulder. Good instincts, though. You took charge. Now next time, finish the sequence. I watched as doubt flickered in her eyes. Exactly what Caldwell expected from someone untested. But me, I thrived on it. That evening, Caldwell's assistant summoned me. His office door cracked open, and I walked in, closing it behind me. He sat behind the vast mahogany desk, steepled fingers tapping. Impressive work today, he said. Elena handled the crisis well. I nodded. She did. But she still needs guidance. He leaned forward. I like that, Hawk. You never let my team rest on their laurels. I forced a smile. Sweet poison. My pleasure. As I left, I caught Elena's reflection in the glass, her eyes burning with resolve. This time I wondered, how far would I push her before she broke? Because Caldwell was watching, and if she failed, the blame would land squarely on her shoulders. Back at my desk, I pulled up the file named Elena Fail Points, a dossier I'd compiled from Prescott's mistakes and my own notes. I added notes from today's sprinkler incident, checklist incomplete, server risk. Then I blacked out the final comment. If Caldwell's faith wavers, she's out by Friday. I smiled as I locked the file. Tomorrow would be chaos, and when it came, Caldwell would choose sides, and I would be waiting. The memory of Prescott's terrified face haunted me, but it also fueled me. Because this company didn't reward survival, it devoured those who couldn't adapt. I drained my coffee. It tasted bitter, but I drank it like a warrior downing a foul potion before battle, because in this game, bitterness was the only weapon I had left, and I would wield it without mercy. The next morning, the office felt different, hale and hollow like the calm before a storm. I arrived before dawn, the glass tower reflecting the city's awakening orange glow. I walked past the rows of cubicles, each one a battlefield of silent ambitions, and stopped at Grant's desk. The junior analyst glanced up, bleary-eyed. I handed him a printed memo. Team meeting in conference room B at 8:15 a.m. sharp. Be ready to discuss the Henderson merger. He nodded, adrenaline kicking in. Perfect. Chaos thrives on precision. At exactly 8:15, Elena and I marched into the room. The team was already assembled. Grant, the data whiz, Rosa, the client liaison, and Dan, our over-caffeinated strategist. Elena stood at my side, her posture taut. I clicked my pen. Morning, everyone. Today, we finalized the Henderson absorption strategy. Mrs. Henderson personally requested our presence. Let's do her proud. Elena cleared her throat and distributed packets. They were dense. Financial projections, integration timelines, risk assessments I'd overseen. Her fingers brushed mine as she handed over the final report. Electricity crackled. I've organized the data by priority, she began, voice steady. We'll start with the 3 critical integration points: system alignment, team consolidation, and brand harmonization. Grant raised his hand. Did you see the Q3 underperformance in Tech Ops? It's not in these projections. Elena glanced down, brow knitting. Rosa leaned forward. And what about the client churn figures? The room shifted. 2 questions, both valid. Elena's face went pale, just enough for Caldwell's memory to flash back. I spoke before she could falter. Great points. Elena, can you pull up the Tech Ops dashboard? She complied, tapping the tablet. The graph loaded. Blue lines dipping. Here, she said. But these numbers are provisional. I wanted to confirm them before final inclusion. Rosa frowned. We can't present provisional data to the Hendersons. They need certainty. Grant folded his arms. We risk losing credibility. Elena swallowed. I spotted Caldwell's father-like gaze in my mind, waiting. The team's confidence in her teetered. Let's pivot, I said. We'll acknowledge the potential variance, then outline our mitigation plan. That shows honesty and preparedness. She nodded, relief flooding her features. Mitigation includes a buffer in our timeline and a separate task force for tech ops stabilization. Dan scribbled notes. I like it, Rosa relaxed. Smart. We present that. Elena's pulse slowed. The team rallied. Perfect. She survived. And team buy-in cemented. But here's the catch. In 2 days, she's giving this same presentation to the Henderson board. If she stumbles, they'll bail. If she succeeds, Caldwell might trust her. And that can't happen. I slipped her a post-it. Remember, Robbins from Henderson hates caveats. Sell confidence. She looked at me, eyes wide. Why didn't you include that in the packet? I shrugged. Your packet. Make it yours. Her breath caught as she peeled off. I watched her leave the room, moving with purpose now. The following hours were a blur. I coached other teams, protected my projects, and mapped out undisclosed contingency lines. When lunchtime came, I found Elena in the cafeteria line. She hovered by the salad bar, eyeing the ingredients as carefully as she'd studied my dossier. I sat across from her. You're doing fine. She hesitated, then her voice lowered. Why are you helping me? A grin tugged at my lips. Because Caldwell asked me to, and because I need to see how far you'll go. She exhaled, then pushed her hair behind her ear. I won't fail. Her conviction was genuine, dangerous for Caldwell. I tapped my fingers on the table. Just remember, perfection under pressure is an illusion. Real leadership is about adaptation. She nodded, stepping away. That afternoon, I got the invite. Henderson board, 2 p.m. sharp. My heart raced as I opened Elena's updated slide deck. Streamlined, confident, and with that buffer in red font. It looked solid. Too solid. I saved a copy and slipped it to the top drawer of my desk. Then I watched, hidden through the glass wall. She began, smooth as silk. The board's stern faces softened as she outlined integration wins. She paused at the TechOps slide, swallowed, then launched into contingency tactics. She didn't falter. When she wrapped, the chairman leaned forward and nodded. Elena smiled, triumphant. The board applauded. Caldwell's name lit up on my phone. Text. Well done. My stomach churned. I closed my eyes. She'd beaten the test. But tests never end. I had one more move. Tonight. Elena would walk out of Henderson with praise. But tomorrow, I'd remind her the real world was unforgiving. At 8:47 p.m., I sent an email. Subject, Henderson integration follow-up. Body, attached detailed timeline adjustments, plus expanded budget forecasts. I hit send. My phone pinged. Caldwell's reply. Excellent work, Elena. Keep me posted. I forwarded the email to myself, then attached the crushing forecast. An adjusted budget that doubled the costs. I resent it to Caldwell, blind copying the board. As I hit send, I pictured his face when the Hendersons saw those figures. Chaos. The board's confidence would crumble. Elena's moment would shatter. I leaned back, satisfied. In this office, power is transient. I've learned that the hard way. And if Caldwell wants to keep me, he'll learn it too. Tomorrow, I'd watch the fallout. Sweet, inevitable fallout. The last courier left as I shut down my station. I grabbed my coat, walked past empty desks, and into the cold night. The city lights glinted like fireflies, alive, unpredictable. Dawn broke over Lake Michigan, painting the skyline amber. I boarded the elevator in near silence, the weight of last night's scheme settling in my bones. The Henderson fallout would hit today, and I needed the perfect vantage point. I passed Elena's desk, untouched since last night. She sat motionless, head in her hands, the glow of her tablet illuminating her strained expression. I stopped. Bad night? Her gaze lifted, eyes rimmed with fatigue. They didn't like the new numbers. I saw the email. I nodded. I saw your boss's note. He wants a damage control meeting at noon. She snapped the tablet shut. He's going to come down on me. I tapped the edge of my planner. Then let's be ahead of him. Gather everyone at 11:30. We own this. She hesitated. Lead it? I shrugged. It's your apology tour, but I'll be there. At 11:30, the conference room buzzed. Caldwell strode in, face thunderous, followed by Natalie from HR and 2 fresh suits from finance. They formed an inner circle around the glass table. I stood at the back, silent, while Elena fidgeted at the head. She swallowed and opened her notes. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, voice quivering, I want to address the discrepancies in yesterday's forecast. She marched through her revised deck, this time, leading with the reality rather than hiding it. She owned the mistake, laid out immediate corrective measures, and capped with a bold new proposal. A revised budget that reallocated resources to high-impact areas, preserving Henderson's confidence. Caldwell's eyebrows stayed raised, unreadable. When she finished, he asked the only question that mattered. Can you deliver this by end of week? Elena looked at me, her anchor. She exhaled. Yes. He nodded curtly. Make it so. Then he stormed out. Silence filled the room. Then Natalie cleared her throat. Impressive recovery. A grin flickered on Elena's lips. I slipped out, letting her bask in the aftermath. This is how you survive, I reminded myself. Adapt. Command respect. But I had other matters to attend. I headed to the 21st floor lounge, where our black budget projects brewed. I tapped my phone. Elena's victory was a temporary truce with Caldwell. My real showdown loomed, the final restructuring vote tonight, at Caldwell's penthouse. If I lost, I'd be next on the chopping block. The lounge door slid open. I found Grant and Rosa waiting, files in hand. They nodded. In 10 minutes, Rosa whispered. Get the numbers, I said. I'll handle the pitch. We assembled around the high-top table, key data points, performance metrics, client satisfaction indices. Everything Caldwell missed in his reorg proposal. I'll present at 7, I said. We show the board that restructuring me out would tank revenue 15%. They won't dare. Grant studied the slides. You really think you can sway them? I tapped my phone. I already swayed Elena. Now it's my turn. At 6:45, I stood in Caldwell's entry hall. The marble foyer felt cavernous. One by one, the board members arrived. Stern suits, calculating eyes, a fur coat, a designer clutch. They brushed past, unaware of the storm brewing. I greeted them with crisp handshakes and guided them to the living room where glasses of whiskey waited. Caldwell hovered nearby, irritation flaring in his glare. I offered my opening line. Thank you for inviting us to this critical vote. I know change can be unsettling, but the numbers tell a clear story. I clicked the remote. Our slides flicked on. Impact analyses, profit curves, client retention forecasts, each graph precise, colored in balanced hues. I watched as the board leaned forward, eyes tracking every line. Caldwell's hand twitched. Then I drilled the final point. If I am removed, we risk not only revenue loss but client defections you can't quantify, legal penalties for breaching service-level agreements, and a potential $2 million hit in the first quarter. The data is unmistakable. Silence stretched. Then the chairman stood, purse her wallet in hand. Ms. Hawk, your case is persuasive. The others nodded in turn. Caldwell's jaw clenched. I smiled, feeling the room tilt in my favor. As the vote passed, unanimous in my retention, I let the applause wash over me. I'd won. Later, Caldwell cornered me. You played a dirty game. I shrugged. Business isn't clean. You taught me that. He seethed. This isn't over. I turned away. It ended tonight. On the elevator down, I exhaled. The city lights blurred as I descended. I'd kept my position. Elena survived. Caldwell was on notice. But this fight never ends. Tomorrow someone new will walk in, and I'll be ready, or I won't last another week. The office was eerily silent as I stepped through the glass doors, the aftermath of the Henderson collapse still reverberating in my mind. Word had spread like wildfire. The board's fury, the emergency meeting, the blame pinned squarely on Elena. I paused at her empty desk, remembering her triumphant smile just days ago. Now, her chair was vacant, the screensaver flickering in the dim morning light. I didn't yawn as I usually did on sleepless nights. I relished the alertness that rises from the edge of a victory delayed. Today was the true test. Caldwell had called an all-hands meeting at 9 a.m., promising sweeping announcements. Rumor had it that he intended to restructure the project team yet again. And I knew, with cold certainty, it was my turn to feel the knife twist. At exactly 8:50, I found Grant and Rosa in the hallway. Grant's face was pale. She didn't show up for Calicorp, did she? He asked in a whisper. Rosa nodded. Rumor is she bailed after the Henderson fiasco. I nodded once. Perfect. I'd orchestrated the catalyst. Now I needed Caldwell to believe he could only count on me. The mezzanine conference room was packed by 8:59. Caldwell, red-faced and breathless, glared at the crowd. He tapped the lectern and cleared his throat. Listen up, he began. We've weathered some storms this week. Henderson is on life support, Calicorp is delayed, and morale is at rock bottom. He paused, letting the tension build. I'm eliminating the operations lead role. The new structure will consolidate responsibilities under a single director. Effective immediately, Aurelia Hawk will assume that position. A stunned silence fell. My heart hammered, but my face stayed calm. I was the victor, but I held no mercy in my chest. Caldwell continued, voice shaky. Aurelia, congratulations. I expect you to streamline the division, cut costs, and, his eyes flicked to me as if seeking confirmation, restore confidence. I climbed to the lectern, my boots clicking against the polished concrete floor. The room exhaled as I spoke. Thank you, Mr. Caldwell. I know many of you have questions, but let me be clear. This is our opportunity. We've learned from every failure. Henderson, Calicorp, even Prescott's early exit. Growth demands resilience. Starting today, we implement a 3-phase turnaround plan. I outlined the phases: rapid stabilization, targeted client outreach, and a revamped internal training program, my ultimate masterpiece. Each step was designed to reinforce that only I could guide this ship through its fiercest storms. In the middle of the presentation, I paused and looked out over the room, locking eyes with familiar faces. This story took us a long time. If you like it, subscribe! Now, back to the story. A ripple of awkward laughter danced through the crowd, but the momentum carried me forward. By the time I concluded, heads nodded, pens scratched notebooks, and Caldwell offered a tentative smile from the back. As I stepped down, Rosa approached, eyes bright. You nailed it. Grant chimed in. Team's on board. I exhaled, letting the praise wash over me. This was only Act 1. The real challenge lay ahead. Proving that my new role wasn't just cosmetic. Elena's collapse had shown Caldwell true loyalty came at a price. One he would continue to pay. Later that afternoon, I sat in my new corner office, surveying the city from the 24th floor. The skyline stretched endlessly, a reminder that ambition knows no bounds. My phone buzzed. A message from HR. Your first day as director begins Monday. Please review attached onboarding. I opened the file. Dozens of protocols, compliance matrices, and a link to the mandatory diversity training video. I laughed, the sound echoing in my empty office. Tomorrow I'd call the first project team meeting under my command. But tonight, I'd celebrate. Quietly, but with intention. I poured a small glass of scotch, raised it to the skyline, and drank. Because in this game, triumph tastes better when savored alone. Next time, the real work begins. Elena's legacy still haunts these halls, and I intend to turn her collapse into my indestructible foundation. But every empire demands sacrifice. Cliffhanger, a mysterious email pings. Subject, checkmate. This story took us a long time. If you like it, subscribe. Now back to the story. The next morning, the office felt like a battlefield swathed in fog. Elena's implosion at the Henderson fallout had set the tone. Whispers trailed me down every corridor. I arrived at 7:15 a.m., earlier than usual, to stake my ground before Caldwell's restructuring momentum shifted again. My first stop, the IT closet. Our systems had underperformed under the new forecasts I'd sent, and the overnight reset had triggered a cascade of server alerts. I tapped the biometric lock code, my thumbprint the only thing that got me in now that I'd advanced to director, and slipped inside. Rows of humming servers glowed in the low light. I found Marco, our lead sysadmin, bleary-eyed but alert. Morning, Hawk, he mumbled, swiveling in his chair. The alert log flickered on the screen, dozens of failed write cycles. Walk me through it, I said, planting my coffee on the shelf. He ran a finger down the error list. After your budget recalibration emails, the load balancer throttled the writes. We had to revert to cold storage. It's slowing down every query. I exhaled. What's the ETA on full recovery? Midday if we optimize the caches. Good. Keep me posted. I left him to it, already pulling up my planner. Every second counted. Next stop, Elena's abandoned desk. Her workspace was draped in dust. I rested a hand on the chair, her perfume still faint in the fabric. A file lay on the corner, her cleared HR separation paperwork. I flipped it open. Exit date scheduled for last Friday. But she never signed. They'd manually processed her departure. Something bothered me, her signature missing. I closed the file and slipped it into my bag. It might be leverage. At 8 o'clock, I convened Grant and Rosa in the war room. Whiteboards scrawled with timelines and metrics formed a labyrinth around us. Status? I asked. Grant tapped his tablet. Server's back online at 85%. CRM latency is 3 seconds. Still double our SLA. Rosa shifted. And client queries? They're piling up. I nodded. I want an all-hands alert at 9 to address service updates. Transparency now buys us goodwill. We split tasks. Grant drafted the email. Rosa queued the client calls. I drafted the company-wide alert. As I wrote, a ping lit up my inbox. Subject line, checkmate. No sender, no body, just the title. My pulse quickened. I opened the hidden attachment. A screenshot of Elena's file. Her resignation marked completed with a digital signature in my handwriting. I stared at the screen. Someone had forged my signature. But who? And why weaponize it now? I stood. Rosa, hold on dialing. Grant, pull audit logs. Focus on HR system access. They sprang into action. Outside, the office hummed to life. Phones blinking, emails cascading. By 9 o'clock, the alert went out. Dear clients, we are experiencing intermittent delays. Our team is actively resolving, and we appreciate your patience. Feedback pinged back. Some irritated, most understanding. Crisis 1 diffused. But internally, a storm gathered. At 10:15, Emily Tran from HR knocked on my door. She looked pale, unsettled. Director Hawk, I need to speak with you. I closed my laptop. What's up? She handed me a printed memo. Your signature is on Elena's severance agreement, but our records show you were out of office that day. The board is asking questions. My stomach dropped. HR system logs will prove it wasn't me. She shook her head. They were wiped. Someone cleared all access logs. I nodded slowly. The board meeting vote was yesterday. Someone wanted me destabilized. But who gained from Elena's departure and now my potential downfall? Thank you, Emily. I'll handle it. As she left, I stared at the memo. Architecture of betrayal was complex. I needed allies. I called Rosa. Meet me in my office in 10. Grant shuffled in behind her. I closed the door. I'm compromised, I said. Signature forged. Audit logs missing. They exchanged glances. We suspected someone high up, Rosa said. But forging your signature, this is escalation. Grant slid his tablet across. I tracked the HR system override to Caldwell's admin account. My heart thundered. You're sure? He nodded. He cleared logs at 2 a.m. yesterday. Betrayal's edges cut deeper. The man who claimed to need me now framed me to get rid of me. I closed my eyes, mind racing. I couldn't let Caldwell engineer my exit. Not again. Here's the plan, I said. Rosa, you leak a memo to the board. Highlight the risk of tampering with executive files. Frame it as an anonymous security alert. Grant, compile all remaining logs, emails, calendar entries, to prove my presence that day. They both understood. Our final gambit. By noon, the board's inboxes flooded with red flag warnings. Internal security breach. Possible malicious insider. Caldwell's phone buzzed. Screenshots of his admin login at 2 a.m. The board chairman emailed me. Urgent meeting at 3. I straightened my blazer and headed to the glass-walled conference suite. As I walked, I felt the hum of the building pulse beneath my feet, alive with corporate intrigue. At 3 o'clock, I entered. Caldwell sat at the head, flanked by the chairman and 2 board members. Their faces were unreadable. The chairman cleared his throat. Director Hawk. We've received alarming reports of file tampering. Mr. Caldwell's account was used to override logs. Can you explain? I took the seat opposite Caldwell. Chairman, I compiled evidence proving my location and access logs from multiple systems. This attack was orchestrated to frame me and force my removal. I laid out timestamps, email headers, digital signatures, a forensic tapestry. Caldwell's lips twitched. When I finished, the chairman looked at Caldwell. Is this true? Caldwell stammered. I was investigating Elena's departure. I accessed logs to confirm my suspicions. Quote, if you suspected fraud, I interjected softly, you should have reported it, not concealed it. The chairman nodded gravely. We'll convene an emergency vote. As they discussed, I felt power shift beneath me. Betrayal fought back, so I'd break it. Hours later, the vote came through. Caldwell suspended pending investigation. I appointed interim CEO. I exhaled, vision blurred for a moment. I'd turned his checkmate into my own winning pawn. But at what cost? The empire I'd built teetered on a knife's edge. Tomorrow, I'd decide whether to reposition or rebuild entirely. Because in this game, alliances dissolve, but only the ruthless survive. The next morning, the fallout was palpable. The Henderson board's whispers had morphed into a roar of outrage. I could feel it radiating through the building like a low-frequency hum. I arrived at 6:45 a.m., earlier than usual, because in the wake of chaos, the first move always sets the narrative. I found Rosa in the break room, frantically scrolling through her phone. When she saw me, relief washed over her face. They're calling for an emergency client summit, she blurted. Caldwell's at risk of losing Henderson entirely unless we present new cost-saving measures by noon. I nodded, steepled my fingers. Perfect. I needed Henderson tethered to me like an anchor, desperate for stability. Get Grant on the metrics, I said. I'll handle the pitch. She obeyed, darting off. I surveyed the break room. Empty mugs, scattered napkins, a lone peanut on the counter. It looked like a war zone. At 8 o'clock, I convened our team in conference room C. Scratch that. Our war room. Grant and Rosa were already there, laptops open, whiteboards scrawled with cost reduction figures. Numbers? I asked. Grant tapped the screen. We can cut vendor costs by 12% without impacting service level agreements. Plus, if we renegotiate our data storage contracts, we save another 8%. Rosa chimed in, voice firm. We can stagger deployment milestones to avoid peak staffing costs. That's another 5%. I scribbled quick notes. Good. Let's aim for a combined 25% savings. That'll buy us credibility. I closed my eyes momentarily, envisioning Caldwell's face when Henderson heard these figures. His empire would crumble without me. At 11:50, I strode into the glass auditorium where Henderson's executives waited. Caldwell limped in behind me, face drawn. The Henderson CFO, a sharp-featured woman named McAllister, flicked her pen at me. Hawk, we expected Caldwell to lead this discussion, she said. I tilted my chin. He requested I step in, given the urgency. She arched an eyebrow but gestured to the screen. I clicked the remote. Our slides loaded. Breakdown of vendor renegotiations, adjusted staffing schedules, a timeline visual. I spoke with calm authority, weaving in risk assessments and contingency plans. Every quarter point shaved off costs landed like a strike to Caldwell's credibility. Henderson's board members scribbled notes, nodded, and exchanged glances. When I concluded, silence stretched. Impressive, McAllister said, tapping the table. We can proceed on these terms, provided detailed implementation plans by end of day. Caldwell exhaled like a deflating balloon. I offered a thin smile. Consider it done. As I left the room, I felt Henderson's lifeline coil around me tighter than ever. But this victory was only the beginning. Back at my desk, I drafted the implementation roadmap. Tactical steps, overseers, deadlines. I assigned tasks to Rosa, Grant, and 2 other team leads. I hit send and felt the hum of emails zipping through the system. At 2:15 p.m., Caldwell called. Hawk, You saved the client. I leaned back in my chair. That's what I do. His voice was brittle. Just don't get too comfortable. I laughed softly. Comfortable? I thrive in chaos. He hesitated. Meet me in my office at 4. I said, on my way, and hung up. At 3:50, I found him in his office, scanning the city through floor-to-ceiling windows. He turned without looking. You're a godsend, for now, he said. Simple formula, I replied. Find the problem, solve it. He closed his eyes. The board's happy. Tomorrow's your official rollout. I appreciate it. I nodded, unchecked satisfaction warming my chest. I'll see you at the launch meeting. As I walked out, I passed Elena's empty desk. A pang of something. Regret? No, that was weakness. Instead, I felt resolve. In a world where loyalty is transactional, I'd shown that value is non-negotiable. But tomorrow's rollout would test me again. Under attack from within. Dawn's pale light filtered through the blinds as I entered the office, tension crackling like static in the air. The Henderson board's aftermath was still settling, but the real test loomed. Today was the official rollout of my 3-phase turnaround. Failure wasn't an option. I passed Elena's old desk en route to mine, her abandoned world a silent testament to corporate ruthlessness. I touched the chair lightly, recalling the way she'd lit up here when she believed in me. Then I steeled myself and moved on. At 7:30 a.m., I convened the project leads in the war room. Grant, Rosa, Dan, and 2 new faces, each representing a key function. The whiteboards were alive with color-coded timelines. Phase 1 kicks off now, I said, voice low but firm. Marco, finalize server optimizations by noon. Rosa, coordinate client outreach. Dan, recalibrate budgets. Grant, monitor KPIs. They nodded, eyes bright with determination. I watched them file out, then sat at my desk, drafting a launch memo for the entire division. As I typed, a ping lit up my screen. Caldwell's name flashed in the subject line. Good luck, it read. No commentary, no signature. A test or a truce. I dismissed it, focusing on the task at hand. By 10 o'clock, Phase 1 was underway. Marco's team rerouted traffic to optimized cache nodes, dropping latency by 40%. Client emails rolled out, clarifying new SLAs and reinforcing our commitment. The metrics dashboard glowed green. I allowed myself a thin smile. Momentum favored the bold. Then, at 11:15, disaster struck. The server cluster in the London satellite office overheated, tripping emergency shutdowns. Client tickets spiked, and the metrics board flickered. Shit, I muttered. I slammed my palm on the desk and dialed Marco. Status? His voice was tight. Overheat sensor jammed, rolling backup loads, but we're down 60%. I tapped my pen. Activate manual overrides and divert traffic to Chicago primary. Report when stable. I hung up and marched to the server room. In the humming maze of hardware, I found Marco's team scrambling. Clear the primary line and switch the load balancers now, I barked. They complied, sweat beading on their brows. Through the glass, I saw the load graphs realign. CPU usage dropped, service stabilized. I exhaled. Good. Let's move to Phase 2. Back at the war room, I updated the team. We adapt. Rosa, accelerate client outreach for London accounts. Dan, adjust budgets for urgent hardware repairs. Grant, rerun forecasts with new uptime metrics. Hours blurred as we pivoted, emails, calls, console commands a furious ballet. By 3:45 p.m., the London cluster was back to 90% capacity, and client sentiment had swung back to cautious optimism. I felt the exhaustion creep in, but I couldn't show it. Phase 3 awaited, the internal training program, a legacy I intended to cement. At 5 o'clock, I emerged in the training suite. Rows of seats faced a projection screen. I stood before a gathering of new hires and mid-level managers, faces eager, some skeptical. Welcome, I began, voice steady. Today, we're not here to teach you how to follow rules. We're here to teach you how to break them, responsibly. Because in the real world, success demands adaptation, innovation, and courage under fire. I outlined case studies. Henderson merger, the calamity I'd orchestrated, and how we'd rebounded. I walked them through crisis simulations, live server demos, client negotiation role plays. During a simulation, I paused and asked, who here would have reallocated cache nodes without waiting for approval? Several hands shot up. Good. Those are the people I want on my team. The session ended with emphatic applause. As attendees filed out, I caught Rosa's eye. She nodded. Phase 3 accomplished. I returned to my office, drained but invigorated. The 3 phases were live, the division humming with renewed vigor. Caldwell's empire might have tried to bury me, but I'd unearthed a new foundation. Before I could savor the triumph, my phone chimed. A calendar invite, CFO check-in, 7 p.m. No notes. A late-night meeting with the numbers guy? Intriguing. I stood, gazing at the city skyline as dusk settled. The office lights shimmered below like stars in an urban galaxy. I poured a glass of scotch, swirling it thoughtfully. Tomorrow, new challenges. But tonight, I had one more move. I tapped out a message to Elena's personal email, still active. Hope you're well. Your story isn't over. Hit send. Because in this world of ruthless ambition, the only constant is the game itself, and I intend to play it to the end. The office felt unusually quiet at first light, as if the walls themselves were waiting for the aftermath of last night's moves. I pushed through the glass doors at precisely 6:30 a.m., keyed entry unobstructed by the usual hush of security. The corridor lights were dimmed, and the only sound was the echo of my heels on polished marble. My first stop was Elena's old desk, still vacant, still haunting. I scanned the empty monitors, then set my bag down and opened my laptop. The email thread from last night's Checkmate Gambit was at the top. Responses from board members, legal counsels, and IT all confirming Caldwell's suspension and my interim command. The taste was sweet, but I couldn't savor it too long. By 7 o'clock, the war room was lit with the glow of laptops and urgency. Rosa and Grant waited, eyes red from late-night data sifting. They greeted me with nods, and we plunged right in. Network integrity? I asked. Grant pointed to the metrics dashboard. Restored to 99.8% uptime since morning. No anomalies since the false signature purge. I exhaled. Good. Any fallout from Caldwell's suspension? Rosa tapped her phone. Just rumors. Some staff worried about leadership vacuum, but no major churn. I nodded. Let's keep it that way. Today we announced the formal transition plan. I want transparency. No shadows. We sketched a briefing. Clear communication to staff, client assurances, and a Q&A session with HR. By 9 a.m., the memo was sent. Director Hawk assumes interim leadership. Fireside chat at 3 p.m. in auditorium. The office buzz returned. I passed by Caldwell's now vacant office and paused at the door. He'd been suspended, but no one had confiscated his belongings. A half-empty coffee mug, a framed family photo, a stray tie draped over the chair. It felt too easy. I moved on. At 10:30, I joined the executive floor for surprise client visits. Today, 2 major accounts requested FaceTime. The first, Century Media, a long-standing partner. In their sleek boardroom, I stood opposite their CMO. The air conditioner hummed. I opened with candor. You may have heard about recent leadership changes. I want to assure you the transition will be seamless. Our service standards remain unwavering. She studied me. You've handled crises before, but this is unexpected. I leaned forward. Experience, insight, and a team dedicated to stability. Let's review your campaign timelines to confirm we're on track. We spent the hour revalidating deliverables, smoothing over concerns. By the end, her posture relaxed, and she shook my hand firmly. Back at HQ, I raced the clock to prepare for the 3 p.m. fireside. At 2:59, the auditorium was packed. I stood on the small stage, spotlight warm, the seats filled with eager faces, analysts, managers, operators, each with questions simmering in their minds. I approached the mic. Thank you for joining me. No spin, no corporate jargon. Leadership changed, but our mission hasn't. You're the backbone of this company. Let's have an honest conversation. Questions flew. Job security, project timelines, Caldwell's future. I answered with transparency, outlining the interim plan, a search committee, employee representation, and an open-door policy. A hand shot up. It was Dan, our strategist. What happens if the committee takes months? I smiled. Then I'll be here, guiding you. And if the board appoints a new CEO, I'll transition responsibly. But until then, I lead. Applause rippled. A few skeptical faces softened. Afterward, Rosa cornered me. You disarmed them. Good job. Grant chimed in. Turnout was huge. I nodded. Transparency wins trust. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You should have taken me up on my offer. I stared at the screen. No signature. Whoever sent it knew I'd find it. As dusk fell, I decided to follow the trail. It led me to the security office, where logs of last night's camera feeds were archived. I slipped inside, flashed my interim ID, and accessed the video catalog. The timestamp of Caldwell's desk was busy, footprints and figures, but no definitive evidence of Caldwell's signature rights. Then I noticed a second login, the head of corporate security, Devin Marks. My blood froze. Tomorrow I'd confront him. Because in this Game of Thrones, the checkmate never lasts. You must anticipate the countermove. The morning sunlight cut through the slats of my blinds like a verdict, unforgiving and clear. At 6:15 a.m., I walked the halls of our building, the hum of fluorescent lights echoing with tension. Word had spread. Henderson's board demanded a revised budget presentation by noon. The bitterness from last night's ambush still lingered in the air. I passed Elena's vacant desk, noting a single sticky note left behind. Good luck. I pocketed it. Sentiment was a weakness I couldn't afford. At 7 o'clock, Rosa arrived, coffee in hand and worry in her eyes. They republished the integration follow-up memo with the original inflated figures, she said. Elena's email leaked. I nodded. They'll blame us for sending the wrong file. Grant appeared next, tablet in hand. Client sentiments dipping again. Henderson's CFO called. She wants answers. I steepled my fingers. Then let's preempt the narrative. We'll own the mistake, pivot to a recovery plan, and propose new metrics. We huddled in the war room, redrafting slides, drafting talking points, and scripting our apology. By 9:30, we had the honest remediation strategy. I saved it under two names, one for internal, one for the board. Control of perception was a weapon. At 10:45, we convened the internal team. I stood at the head of the table. Real talk. We screwed up. But transparency and action can restore trust. Here's the plan. I outlined 3 steps: immediate correction, accelerated deliverables, and a new oversight committee chaired by Rosa. Heads nodded, determination sparking. At noon, I strode into the glass auditorium. The board members were already seated, sterile formality clinging to the room. Caldwell's absence was glaring. He remained suspended. I clicked the remote and began. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for this opportunity to correct our course. You have my full accountability for the integration follow-up miscommunication. I owned the mistake, flipped to the revised slides, and walked through the corrective actions. Each point was precise. Client-facing updates sent within the hour. Revised budget forecasts with built-in contingencies. A weekly audit to guarantee accuracy. I ended with a bold proposal. To prevent future lapses, I recommend establishing an internal audit panel reporting directly to the board. Silence filled the room. Then the chairman leaned forward. Ms. Hawk, this is a proactive solution. I'm pleased with your leadership. Merely pleased. An understatement. But progress. As I left, I felt the tide shift yet again in my favor. Back at my desk, the phone rang. It was Devin Marks, head of security. Director Hawk, you wanted to see me? He asked. Yes, I replied. Meet me in my office in 5. He arrived, expression unreadable. You uncovered my participation in the signature forgery and elevated yourself to interim CEO. I nodded. Now you're here, coincidence? He smirked. I played the board, but I didn't expect you to fight back so effectively. I fight for survival, I said. Unless you have proof to demand my removal, we're even. He studied me, then nodded slowly. Agreed. But know this, alliances are temporary. I let the words hang. Understood. He left. I closed the door and exhaled. Devon's truce was a fragile one. At 4 p.m., I called Rosa and Grant. Day 10 as interim CEO, I said. Not bad. But tomorrow we face a new challenge. Mr. Caldwell's appeal hearing with HR. Rosa paled. He's trying to get reinstated? Yes, and if he succeeds, he'll want revenge. Grant tapped his tablet. We should gather his infractions, the signature forgery, the misrouted emails, and present a case. I nodded. Prepare it. We meet at 7. As I gazed out at the city skyline, the theater of my ambitions, I realized that every move had placed me deeper into this game. Victory tasted sweet, but each victory demanded a new battle. The scent of espresso and fear mingled in the hallway as I arrived at 7:10 a.m., files in hand and secrets at my fingertips. The fallout from yesterday's CFO summit still echoed. Clients reassured but weary, my authority cemented yet constantly challenged. Today's mission: secure the final budget approval from the Finance Committee, while managing whispers that Caldwell's HR appeal loomed on the horizon. I paused at the glass doors of the Finance Council's suite. Through the tinted windows, I could see Ledger, our CFO, and 2 external auditors poring over spreadsheets. Grant hovered by the side, ready with real-time KPI updates on his tablet. I straightened my jacket and entered, offering confident smiles. Ledger looked up first, nodding curtly. I placed the Honest Remediation Strategy binder on the conference table, then set the project roadmap beside it. Thank you for meeting me, I began, voice steady. We've addressed the integration leak, restored our clients' confidence, and recalibrated our budgets with new transparency measures. Today, I present the final forecast and seek your approval to lock in our Q3 financial plan. I clicked through slides, corrected revenue figures, updated cost projections, and the newly proposed internal audit panel's budget. Every line item was bulletproof, built on data and fortified by our crisis response record. One auditor raised a concern. Your contingency fund appears reduced by 15%. How do you plan to handle unforeseen operational risks? I leaned forward. By reallocating non-essential vendor savings and leveraging our new staffing model's flexibility, we maintain a 10% reserve. Additionally, we've secured a line of credit that only activates under predefined conditions, fully transparent, and board-approved. Ledger exchanged a glance with the auditors, then nodded. Solid. But what about Caldwell's appeal? Could leadership uncertainty affect these numbers? I met his gaze. My interim role is endorsed by the board. An appeal won't change that. We have formal documentation confirming my authority. HR's independent review is scheduled for next week, but finance operations continue unimpeded. The auditors whispered briefly, then faced me. We recommend approval contingent on quarterly reviews by your audit panel. I smiled. Agreed. They signed off. The binder returned empty, stamped, approved. Grant let out a breath in my peripheral vision. As I left, Ledger approached. You've mastered the art of corporate warfare. Well played. I inclined my head. Strategy isn't just about offense, it's defense too. Back at my desk, I drafted the announcement. Finance Committee approves revised Q3 budget. I hit send, watching as the news rippled through our internal channels. But victory was fleeting. My phone buzzed, an encrypted message from an unknown sender containing a single line: HR hearing moved to today, 5 p.m. The final act began. The Steel City dawn broke over the skyline, but I hardly noticed as I strode into the office at 6:30 a.m. The corridors were already humming, teams preparing for the HR appeal hearing that loomed at 5 p.m. Today, Caldwell would attempt to reclaim his position. My request: ensure the evidence against him was bulletproof. First order of business: meet with Emily Tran in HR. By 7 a.m., I found her in the staff lounge, reviewing case files. Director Hawk, she greeted softly, sliding a manila folder across the table. This contains Caldwell's formal appeal, plus your rebuttal dossier. I opened it, emails, audit logs, Devon's security override admission. Every piece meticulously gathered. This will suffice. I tapped the dossier. Schedule the hearing for 5. Everyone in that room must receive a copy. She nodded, relief flickering in her eyes. Consider it done. Next, rally my allies. At 8 a.m., I summoned Rosa and Grant. They're expecting a contested hearing, I said. We need to rehearse testimonies. Rosa, you handle HR protocols and policies. Grant, you manage the technical logs and data authenticity. They nodded. We'll be ready, Rosa promised. By midday, the office was tense. Caldwell's supporters whispered in corners. I passed by Prescott's empty desk, her departure a distant echo now replaced by hearings. At 2 p.m., I addressed the executive team in conference room A. Caldwell's absence from morning meetings was conspicuous. He'll challenge the forgery evidence, I warned. Stand firm on the audit logs and Devon's testimony. Quote, Dan raised an eyebrow. You trust Marks will testify? I met his gaze. He has no choice. Either he confirms my evidence or implicates himself further. Silence fell. The stakes were clear. The hours crawled. I reviewed every document, every email chain. No margin for error. At 4:30, I stood outside the hearing room, inhaling deeply. HR's oak door loomed ahead. I entered with Emily, letting Rosa and Grant slip in behind us. Caldwell sat at the opposite table, flanked by his legal counsel. The board chairman presided, expression neutral. Director Hawk, he intoned. You may present your evidence. I stood, paced to a side screen, and began. Ladies and gentlemen, this hearing concerns the integrity of our leadership. The charges against Mr. Caldwell are twofold: unauthorized system access leading to log tampering, and forgery of an executive's digital signature. I submit Exhibit A, audit log number 67,432. The screen displayed Devon's access timestamps. Exhibit B, server override records confirming unauthorized HR system entries. And Exhibit C, the audit trail reconstruction provided by Grant's team. I clicked. The board members examined each slide. Caldwell's counsel shifted uncomfortably. Now, I called Devon Marks to testify, I said. Devon stood, composure forced. I accessed the logs at Mr. Caldwell's instruction, he admitted, voice low. I did not forge the signature, but I failed to record my actions properly. A murmur rippled. Caldwell's lawyer sputtered. I seized the moment. This admission confirms the procedural breach. Combined with the signature mismatch analysis, we have irrefutable proof of misconduct. Caldwell rose, fury in his eyes. This is hearsay. He's protecting you. The chairman raised a hand. Sit, Mr. Caldwell. Devon's testimony stands. Then he turned to me. Are there witnesses to the forgery? Rosa stepped forward. I submitted the HR notification emails, timestamps included. They show the signature file was modified after normal business hours and before Mr. Caldwell's approved logins. She handed printed logs to the chairman. Silence blanketed the room. Caldwell's face drained. The chairman looked at his notes. I find the appeal invalid. Mr. Caldwell's suspension will be upheld, and disciplinary action recommended. He banged the gavel. Hearing adjourned. A wave of relief washed over me. Outside, the world seemed sharper, sunlight brighter, air crisper. But as we exited, I spotted Caldwell in the hallway, eyes burning with vengeance. He called out, voice low, "Enjoy it while it lasts." I turned, meeting his gaze. I intend to. Then I walked away, shoulders squared. Because in this game, victory is just the beginning, and the greatest threats come from those you thought defeated. Morning arrived with the promise of clarity, but the office hummed with restless uncertainty. Yesterday's HR hearing had granted me interim ascendancy, yet whispers of Devon's allegiance and Caldwell's vengeance lingered like toxins in the air. At 6:50 a.m., I slipped into my office, untouched, except for the glow of my laptop's login screen. My first task, decrypt the anonymous text I'd received. You should have taken me up on my offer. I traced its metadata, discovering a hidden routing through a burner SIM. The trail led me not to Caldwell, but to Meredith Price, head of corporate strategy and rumored confidant of the real board power players. My heart pounded. Meredith. Long overlooked, but lethal. I needed proof. I summoned Grant and Rosa to the war room by 7:30. Meredith Price sent a threat, I began, outlining the SIM analysis. She offered me a deal yesterday, before the hearing. I ignored it. Now she's warning me. Rosa frowned. What deal? I tapped the screen. Protection from Caldwell's faction, in exchange for divesting certain accounts under my control. Grant clicked his tablet. Her email was ghosted through an offshore server. She's covering tracks. I nodded. We need leverage. Scan her meeting invites, email threads, anything showing quid pro quo. They dove in. Hours passed as I coordinated project updates, but my mind raced. Meredith's reach extended deeper than I realized. At 11 a.m., I met Rosa. Find anything? She handed me a file, a calendar invite chain where Meredith privately requested that I recommend a restructuring candidate for the emerging markets portfolio, someone from her team. In return, she promised to, quote, safeguard my position. I read the thread. Meredith's digital signature was subtle, but unmistakable. She was the hidden puppeteer. I closed the file. Good work. Now we turn the tables. By noon, I drafted a targeted memo, strategic partnership review, a proposal to audit favoritism in restructuring decisions, chaired by the audit panel introduced last week. I set the recipients to include the board's hidden list and blind copied Meredith. Then I scheduled a 2 p.m. meeting with Ledger and the audit panel. At 1:45, I found Caldwell's old conference room empty. I placed the Meredith email chain on his seat, a silent invitation. At 2 p.m., the panel assembled. Ledger glanced at me expectantly. Today's agenda, I announced, is the Strategic Partnership Review. I propose we examine recent restructuring recommendations for signs of conflict of interest. I advanced to the slide showing Meredith's email thread. Gasps echoed. Ledger's eyes narrowed. This compromises the integrity of our process. The head auditor nodded gravely. We'll launch a full review. I met each panelist's gaze. By evening, we'll have recommendations for the board. As they filed out, Ledger lingered. You're playing a dangerous game. I picked up the Meredith file, a game worth winning. Back at my desk, I drafted the official report. Evidence, timelines, recommendations. I hit send to the board and audit panel, ensuring Meredith couldn't dodge the inquiry. Within minutes, I received 2 simultaneous responses. One from the chairman thanking me for transparency, the other from Devin, watch your back. I smiled. Devin's warning was predictable. Meredith's exposure was the real victory. As dusk approached, I surveyed the vacant desks, Prescott's, Elena's, Caldwell's, each a casualty of ambition. I sipped a scotch, savoring the moment. Tomorrow, the board would convene to decide Meredith's fate. If they vote to remove her influence, my path to permanent leadership widens. But power always demands vigilance. Because in this corporate chessboard, every piece is expendable, and the queen moves with ruthless intent. The sun had barely crested the Chicago skyline when I arrived at the office, the air sharp with the residue of last night's revelations. Whispers of Meredith Price's impending downfall pulsed through the corridors, her influence teetering on the edge. Yet I knew that power doesn't simply vanish. It lingers in the shadows, ready to strike back. I headed straight for the executive kitchen, where Rosa was nursing a tepid latte and scanning her phone. Morning, Rosa. How's the audit panel's review shaping up? She tapped her screen. They've corroborated email trafficking and conflict of interest breaches. The full report goes to the board at noon. Meredith's facing removal. I nodded. Good, but we can't get complacent. Check her remaining allies, especially in finance and strategy. She frowned. I'll cross-reference her endorsement lists. I poured myself a coffee. And secured Devin's loyalty. If he wavers, we lose our anchor in security. At 9 a.m., I convened Grant, Rosa, and Dan in the war room. The whiteboard was filled with names. Meredith's probable supporters across departments. Phase 1. The audit report delivers the first blow. Phase 2, we reinforce our support network. Phase 3, public declaration after the board meeting. I clicked a marker through each step. Grant nodded. I'll funnel key data points to the board members privately. Ensure unanimity. Dan added. I'll draft a communication to the entire division, praising the audit's transparency. Position us as champions of integrity. Rosa looked up. I'll finalize the list of Meredith's allies and quietly revisit their loyalty. By 11:30, everything was in motion. I opened Meredith's conference room, an ironic choice, but fitting, and placed her personalized coffee mug on the table alongside a printed copy of the audit report, stamped, confidential, a subtle reminder that no corner was safe. At noon, the board convened in the tall, mahogany-paneled room. The chairman lifted the audit report and spoke. Ms. Price, the panel's findings are damning. Your recommendation to divest key accounts in exchange for protected status constitutes a conflict that undermines our fiduciary responsibility. Meredith's composure cracked. She stammered through a half-hearted defense. I watched her panic bloom in real time. I'm relieved you've taken this seriously, the chairman continued, glancing at me. Director Hawk's initiative in exposing this misconduct underscores her suitability for permanent leadership. We'll vote on the removal of Miss Price and the confirmation of Miss Hawk tomorrow morning. Applause echoed softly. Meredith's scowl burned like acid, but her empire of influence lay in ruins. As the board dispersed, Ledger approached me. You executed that flawlessly. I brushed a strand of hair behind my ear. Integrity is the best strategy. Ledger nodded. Tomorrow's vote is a formality. You should celebrate tonight. I didn't. Instead, I opened my calendar and scheduled a dinner meeting with Devin Marks. If loyalty had a price, I wanted to ensure I'd paid it. At 6 p.m., I arrived at a discreet bistro. Devin was already there, a glass of red wine waiting. Devin, I greeted, taking a seat. Thank you for coming. He sipped his wine. I heard Meredith's removal is imminent. Your move was bold. I leaned forward. I want to secure your ongoing support. The next phase, the permanent CEO confirmation, requires not just data, but security endorsement. If you stand by me, I'll ensure your division's budget autonomy remains intact. He paused, studying me. After a moment, he placed his glass on the table. Agreed. But remember, I'm no one's fool. Nor am I. We shook hands, a silent pact. Leaving the bistro, I felt the weight of alliances forged and enemies displaced. Power shifted again, this time more securely in my hands. The morning after Meredith's downfall felt strangely hollow. Despite the board's unanimous vote to oust her, and the confirmation memo arriving on my desk at yesterday's end, I couldn't shake the sense that the game had changed shape beneath my feet. Power shifted, but now every faction would recalibrate, new alliances forming in the shadows. I strode into the office at 6:45 a.m., determination burning in my chest. My first stop was the war room, where Rosa was already assembling the morning briefing. She looked up, tension in her eyes. They resurfaced Prescott's email exchange from 2 years ago, she said quietly. Somebody leaked a thread showing her frustration about being overlooked for the director position. It's resurfacing now as a smear campaign against you, positioning Caldwell as the victim. My blood froze. Who has access to those archives? I asked. Rosa tapped her tablet. Only the executive records team and Devin's security logs. I nodded. This wasn't a ploy by Caldwell. He was sidelined. It had to be someone else testing my defenses. Grant, can you verify when the leak occurred? Grant scrolled. 17:04 yesterday, just after Meredith's removal. The access logs tag Devin's account, but timestamps are inconsistent. Could be a proxy. I exhaled. We need a full integrity check on Devin's admin across every system, and prepare a preemptive statement to own the narrative. Prescott's frustration was valid then, but she was compelled to leave under Caldwell's mandate, not mine. Spin it as corporate politics, not personal vendettas. Rosa began drafting, Grant dove into logs. I moved to my office and pulled Prescott's original email chain, reading her words. Ambition, resentment, disappointment. It stung. I'd used her exit as a lesson, but never thought it would rebound like this. By 9:30, our counter-narrative was ready. A company-wide memo acknowledging past frustrations as part of growth. positioning my leadership as an evolution, not an erasure. I hit send. At 10 a.m., I convened the executive team. We're under scrutiny again, I said. This smear campaign is designed to destabilize me before the final CEO vote next week. We can't let it stick. Today's agenda: reinforce internal unity and root out the leak. We divided tasks. Rosa would host listening sessions, Grant would escalate the security audit, Dan would prepare talking points for the CEO Q&A panel scheduled that afternoon. By noon, the office atmosphere had shifted from fear to focused action. The storms of uncertainty were met with swift response. At 2 p.m., I stepped onto the stage in the main auditorium, cameras rolling. The seats were half full, an audience of staff and select board members tuning in. Good afternoon, I began, voice measured. I want to address recent rumors regarding Ms. Prescott's exit from our department. Transparency is our core value. 2 years ago, Prescott expressed frustration at being overlooked. That was a reflection of corporate restructuring under Mr. Caldwell, not my directive. Yesterday's vote reflects our decision to move forward, not erase the past. I paused, scanning faces. Growth demands we learn from past missteps. Under my leadership, we build on lessons, not bury them. That's why your voices, concerns, and ambitions matter more than ever. Tomorrow, I'll hold an open forum. I want to hear directly from you. Applause broke out. The message landed. Empathy and accountability. Back at my desk, I found Devin waiting at the threshold. Devin. He entered, expression unreadable. I checked the admin logs. Timestamps were spoofed, but the leak was initiated from a remote desktop assigned to corporate records. I've isolated the source, Simone Carter, on Madison's team. My heart hammered. Simone had been Meredith's protégé. Thank you, I said, voice low. Schedule her termination, freeze her access, and secure a full audit panel review of that records division. He nodded. Consider it done. As he turned to leave, I called out, Devin, if anything else surfaces, you let me know directly. He paused, stepped back. Understood. He left. I exhaled. Relief mingled with steely resolve. Tomorrow's open forum would mark the beginning of a new chapter, one where voices felt heard, but power remained firmly in my grasp. The company was mine to lead, but leadership demanded vigilance. Betrayal lurked in every unlocked archive. And I intended to lock every door. Morning light streamed through the towering windows as I entered the office at 6:50 a.m., steely resolve coursing through me. Yesterday's memo planting the seeds of Prescott's story had taken root. Conversations buzzed with curiosity rather than condemnation. That was the point. Narrative control was power. But now, another storm brewed. The board's confidential group chat pinged at 7:02 a.m. Emergency session 8 a.m. Review Q4 projections. No details. I keyed into their calendar. Time was tight. I found Grant in the war room, already parsing projection models. Rosa hovered over his shoulder. They want to revise forecasts based on new market volatility, Grant said. But these figures are preliminary. I drummed my fingers. We need a comprehensive sensitivity analysis. Best case, worst case, midline, by 8. They gotta work. The whiteboard transformed into a matrix of scenarios. Market upticks, supply chain disruptions, currency fluctuations. At 7:45, I grabbed the board chairman's inbox. I sent a brief, sensitivity analysis complete. Attached models reflect dynamic scenarios for Q4. Then I printed copies and raced toward conference room D. At 8 a.m., the board assembled, tight faces, expectant eyes. The chairman nodded as I entered with the binder. I anticipated your request, I began, placing the binder on the table. Here are our Q4 sensitivity scenarios. I clicked to the first slide. Scenario A, optimistic market recovery, projected 8% growth. The room leaned forward. Scenario B, moderate stability, 3% growth with 15% volatility buffer. I moved to the next slide. Scenario C, high-risk downturn, break-even case with contingency funding. Each slide detailed action plans for staffing, vendor negotiations, and capital reserves. An investor director said, impressive foresight, but can we trust the assumptions? I met his gaze. Every assumption references current market data, weighted by historical trends and third-party analyses. My team validated each input. I tapped the projection charts. These aren't guesses. They're grounded in robust data. Murmurs rippled. The chairman nodded. Approved. We'll adopt scenario B as the baseline and monitor triggers for A or C. As I left, board members whispered appreciatively. Another narrative sealed in my favor. Back at my desk, I paused. No time to revel. Next on the docket, the open forum with staff at 10 a.m. I prepared my notes. Acknowledgement of past missteps, celebration of recent successes, and a call to collective ownership of the future. I practiced lines in the mirror. Your voice matters. Your expertise shapes our destiny. At 9:45, I stepped onto the dimly lit stage. The auditorium filled with expectant faces, cameras live streaming. I began, "Good morning. Today isn't about one leader, it's about all of us. We've weathered storms, learned hard lessons, and we emerge stronger. I want to hear from you." Hands shot up, questions on career development, strategic priorities, and even concerns about Prescott's legacy. I answered each with candor, listening more than speaking. When time ran short, I closed. Your feedback will shape our roadmap. Please submit your thoughts through the new advisory portal I've launched today. Applause greeted me. I felt the tide shift, team unity growing. Later, I reviewed the forum submissions. Hundreds of actionable ideas on efficiency, culture, and innovation. I forwarded them to department heads, CCing the board. At 4 p.m., I met with Rosa. "This portal changes everything," she said. "Engagement is off the charts." I nodded. Ownership fosters loyalty, and loyalty fortifies power. She smiled. "What's next?" I gazed out the window at the 1,000-acre city sea. Tomorrow, we unveil the Q1 strategic blueprint, built on our forum insights and sensitivity scenarios. Rosa's eyes lit up. "Let's do it." As dusk settled, the city lights shimmering like constellations, I sat at my desk. Each victory had brought new challenges, each alliance a potential betrayal. Yet here I was, director, architect, survivor. The game continued, and I would always be a move ahead. I arrived at the office before sunrise, the city's reflection dancing on the glass facade like a restless heartbeat. The fallout from Elena's boardroom collapse had settled into a quiet dread. Whispers of the crushed budget forecasts spread through the corridors. Today's challenge: restore Henderson's faith before they demanded another scapegoat. My first stop was the executive break room, where Grant and Rosa were already at work. Grant's laptop glowed with open spreadsheets. Rosa's phone buzzed with client updates. "They want a revised forecast by noon," Grant said without looking up. "CFO McAllister is on edge." Rosa nodded. "Clients called in with concerns. They need assurances today." I leaned on the counter, sipping my coffee. "Then we give them more than a forecast. We give them a vision." They exchanged glances. "How?" Rosa asked. I slid a tablet across. "I've outlined 3 new strategic initiatives: digital transformation, regional expansion, and a client-centric innovation lab. Each initiative pairs cost efficiency with growth potential. If we frame the forecast within these pillars, we shift from crisis management to opportunity realization." Their eyes lit up. "Brilliant," Grant said. "Get to work," I said. "Details in an hour." By 9 a.m., the war room buzzed. Whiteboards filled with initiative breakdowns. Budgets, timelines, KPI. I coached the team, demanding clarity and impact. We refined the pitch to perfection. At 11:45, I stepped into the CFO's office. McAllister, flanked by her analysts, looked up with a skeptical frown. "You have 2 minutes," she said. I activated the presentation. "Ladies and gentlemen, our revised Q4 forecast isn't just numbers, it's a roadmap to sustainable growth. Initiative 1, digital transformation will reduce operational costs by 10% through automation. Initiative 2, regional expansion targets emerging markets for a 15% revenue uptick. Initiative 3, the client-centric lab will foster product innovations, projected to increase retention by 20%. I clicked to the combined forecast chart, and the curve rose sharply compared to yesterday's flat line. McAllister's frown softened. "This is ambitious, but plausible." I nodded. "And we have a cross-functional team in place to execute each pillar, with integrated reporting to track progress weekly." She studied the slide, then tapped her pen. "Approved. Send the internal memo." I exhaled. "Thank you." Back at my desk, I drafted the memo, introducing our Q4 strategic growth roadmap, complete with calls to action and team assignments. I hit send and watched as acknowledgement pings filled my inbox. At 2 p.m., I grabbed lunch in the break room. Rosa passed me a note, Meredith's allies circulating a petition to revisit her removal decision. My stomach clenched. Even sidelined, she found ways to fight. I crumpled the note. "We'll handle it after close." At 4 p.m., I gathered the executive team. Meredith's petition is gaining traction among certain board members. We need to preempt it. Tonight, we circulate our Q1 strategic blueprint to the full board, framing our initiatives as irreversible commitments. Once set in motion, no petition can reverse progress. They nodded, determination in their eyes. That evening, I finalized the Q1 blueprint, detailed, comprehensive, and laced with dependencies on the Digital Transformation and Innovation Lab. I sent it to the board with a note, "Our future moves forward. No revisions post-release." The next morning, I entered the boardroom for the weekly meeting. Meredith's petition was on the agenda, but folded beneath the strategic blueprint discussion. As I presented, heads nodded, pens scribbled, and the petition slid off the table without mention. I maintained my composure as the chairman closed the session. "Thank you, Director Hawk. The blueprint charts our way forward." Walking out, I passed Caldwell's old office, empty, echoing. I hesitated, then dropped a copy of the blueprint at the threshold. A silent reminder of progress. As I left, the city lights glittered in the dusk, mirroring the relentless pace of power. Scapegoats, petitions, betrayals, each a test to overcome. And I would continue to do so, one strategic move at a time. Dawn's first light found me already at my desk, reviewing yesterday's disaster recovery data for the London cluster. The jittery hum of the office hinted at another brewing storm. Murmurs that the board's confidence in my leadership might waver if the fallouts continued. But I thrived on pressure. It sharpened every decision. My first order of business: inspect the outcome of last night's forecast bombshell. I opened the sent folder, rereading the email with the inflated budget attachments. The ripple effect was immediate. Client calls demanding clarifications, finance pinging urgent requests, and the board's inbox flooded with "explain this" queries. I exhaled and pivoted. There was no shame in owning mistakes, only in failing to rectify them. I drafted a new email titled "Transparent Budget Revisions," outlining the rationale behind the adjustments and my plan to phase in the increased figures over 3 stages, each tied to performance milestones. I hit send and watched the pings fly. Mid-morning, Rosa and Grant joined me in the war room. "Client reactions are mixed," Rosa reported. "Some are relieved by the staged approach, but several want guarantees." Grant added, "Our updated recovery forecast for London hit 95% uptime. Your apology email helps stabilize sentiment." I nodded. "Good. Now we anchor their trust with action. I want case study rollouts on 2 pilot projects this week, clear deliverables, and weekly progress dashboards." They sprang into action, reorganizing teams and scheduling sprint reviews. At noon, I strode into the executive kitchen to refuel. The usual tension was replaced by an undercurrent of anticipation, staff whispering about the pilot launches. I nodded to Dan, who mouthed, "On track." Small victories mattered. Back at my corner office, I noticed a meeting invite from Ledger. Henderson Stability Review, 3 p.m. Only vague details, but I sensed urgency. I prepared the London metrics, pilot outlines, and the latest client feedback. At 3 p.m., I entered the finance suite. Ledger, McAllister, and 2 board members sat waiting. They greeted me with guarded expressions. Ledger spoke first. "Director Hawk, we need assurance that this office can manage volatility without further escalations. Your staged budget plan. Are you confident?" I set the London report on the table. Our staged approach ties increased spending to measurable performance. Here are the dashboards: real-time metrics, risk thresholds, and automatic rollback triggers. If any KPI dips below 90%, the next funding phase pauses until we resolve issues. I clicked my tablet, displaying a live demo of the dashboard's interface, color-coded alerts, drill-down analytics, and forecast variance charts. McAllister examined the interface. "This is robust. It gives us control and visibility." The board member nodded. "This level of transparency restores our confidence. Approve this plan formally at tomorrow's meeting." Relief washed over me. I stood, shoulders squared. "Thank you." As I left, Ledger smiled. "Well done." But I knew the next challenge awaited. An anonymous leak circulating a falsified payroll discrepancy suggesting I'd approved phantom bonuses for my allies. It was a cheap tactic, aimed to tarnish my integrity. Back at my desk, I found the leaked spreadsheet in my inbox, highlighting bonus line items tied to Rosa, Grant, and Dan, dated last Friday. They'd manipulated the file's metadata to match my digital signature. I tapped into the security logs, Devon's domain. The falsified entries traced back to Simone Carter's workstation, now suspended. Still, someone else must have colluded. I drafted an urgent email to HR and security, report of unauthorized payroll modifications, attached forensic analysis and timestamps. Then I assembled my executive team in the war room. A new smear campaign, this time payroll conspiracies. We own it immediately. Rosa, prepare a transparent payroll report audit for distribution by EOD. Grant, verify actual payouts and highlight corrections. Dan, draft an internal memo reaffirming compensation integrity. They nodded, adrenaline flaring. By evening, the audit report was live. Corrected numbers, revised logs, and an apology for confusion. The internal memo underscored the company's zero tolerance for misconduct. I sent it out at 6 p.m., watching the pings subside. Alone in the silent office, I stared at the city lights. Each victory invited another attack. Every advance demanded defense. But tonight, I'd held my ground. Tomorrow, at the final board vote, they'd decide once and for all, was I the leader this company needed? I would step into that room with data, integrity, and unshakable resolve. Because in this game, there's no end. Only the next move. The morning after the strategic blueprint rollout, the office pulsed with cautious optimism. Yet I sensed the undercurrent of anxious anticipation. Tomorrow's board vote would seal my fate. At 6:30 a.m., I arrived to an empty war room, the whiteboard still streaked with charts from yesterday's meeting. I took a slow breath, letting the weight of the next 24 hours settle in. First, I touched base with Rosa. I found her in the executive lounge, eyes on her tablet. "Board packets are finalized," she said, looking up. "They're being distributed now." "Good," I replied. "And the Q1 blueprint?" She nodded. "Received. Board members are already commenting, mostly praise, but a few caveats about resource allocation." "Expect it," I said. "Now we wait." I moved on to Grant's desk. He presented a tablet with live polling metrics. Internal sentiment at 78% approval, client confidence up to 85%, and Henderson stability rating at 80%. Solid, but not decisive. "We need that final push," I said. "By lunchtime, I want personal check-ins with the 3 swing board members, McAllister, Turner, and the external investor Hansen. Arrange it." He tapped the screen. Immediately. By 9 a.m., I was meeting McAllister in her corner office. Over coffee, I acknowledged her earlier concerns and detailed how the digital transformation pilot would dovetail with her regional growth metrics. She listened, nodding, then offered measured support. "I'll vote in your favor, but I need weekly progress reports." At 10:30, I met Turner in the atrium. He was more reserved, but responsive to financial data. I provided a bespoke report on vendor savings and contingency fund health. He raised an eyebrow. "Impressed. I'm with you." My final meeting was with Hansen, the external investor, at noon in the boardroom foyer. He was cagey, asking probing questions about long-term ROI and risk management. I unveiled a projection model tagged to milestone triggers. After a tense pause, he extended his hand. "Count me in." Each handshake was a brick laid in my fortress. At 2 p.m., I returned to the war room. Rosa and Grant waited. 3 votes secured, I announced. Now we prepare for the formal meeting at 10 a.m. tomorrow. We'll review highlights, field questions, and then we vote. They smiled, relief washing over their features. The afternoon passed in a blur of final rehearsals. I refined my presentation, anticipated hard questions, and ensured every slide was impeccable. By 6 p.m., I was alone in the auditorium, practicing my opening lines one last time. Esteemed board members, I stand before you not just as interim director, but as the architect of a new vision for this company. As I packed up, my phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Tonight at midnight, check your inbox. My pulse quickened. I returned to my desk and found a file waiting, boardvote_final.zip. Inside, drafts of a vote tally predicting a split decision, 9-4, 8 against. Too close. The message, your allies are wavering. I realized someone was testing me, perhaps Devon's security faction or a holdover from Caldwell's network. Whoever it was, I couldn't let them sway the outcome. At 11:45 p.m., I drafted one final email, a concise summary of achievements, pilot successes, and direct quotes from McAllister, Turner, and Hansen pledging their votes. I addressed it to the full board, blind copying the 3 swing members. I hit send at 11:59 p.m. and exhaled. It was now or never. Before dawn, I would stand before the board and claim my destiny, or watch it slip through my fingers. The morning sun peeked through the blinds as I stepped into the boardroom at 9:45 a.m., my reflection in the polished table surface sharp and unwavering. Today was the day. Final vote on my permanent appointment as CEO. Every alliance forged, every betrayal outmaneuvered, every crisis turned into opportunity had led me here. Board members trickled in, murmurs rising like a tide. Caldwell, suspended indefinitely, was absent. Meredith, ousted and silenced, sat stiffly at the end of the table, flanked by 2 silent supporters whose faces betrayed resignation. Devon Marks, loyal as promised, took his seat near the exit camera, a quiet sentinel. I took my place at the head of the table. The chairman, a stern woman with silver hair, tapped her gavel. Director Hawk, you may begin your closing remarks before the vote. I nodded, clearing my throat. My hands were steady, my voice resonant. Esteemed members of the board, colleagues and friends, thank you for your time and trust these past weeks. We've weathered unprecedented challenges, betrayal from within, volatile markets, and the fallout from critical missteps. Yet each crisis has forged us stronger. I clicked the remote. Behind me, the screen displayed a timeline. From Elena's arrival to my interim takeover, the cascade of sabotage attempts, and each triumphant turnaround, from the London cluster recovery to the Henderson stabilization and the strategic growth blueprint. Today, this timeline is not just a record of survival, it's a roadmap of leadership under pressure. We've built real-time dashboards, launched innovation labs, and embedded transparency into our DNA. We've turned reactive fixes into proactive strategies, setting new standards for excellence. I paused, scanning their faces. I stand before you ready to lead, not merely as a caretaker, but as a navigator for the future. My commitment is to every employee, every client, and every shareholder, to blend resilience with vision, discipline with innovation, and integrity with ambition. Silence held the room, and then the chairman spoke. Board members, it's time to vote. A clerk passed ballots. One by one, votes were cast. 8 for, 1 against, a pause, then 2 more for, 0 abstentions, until 20 total. 17 for, 3 against. The threshold met. The chairman banged the gavel. Congratulations, Aurelia Hawk. You are appointed permanent CEO of Henderson Global Solutions. A breath I didn't know I held exhaled into applause. Smiles and handshakes followed as I took the gavel. Meredith's scowl softened into a nod of reluctant respect. Caldwell's absence was a victory in itself. Devon stood, offering a firm handshake. Rosa and Grant, standing at the back, cheered quietly. Moments later, I addressed the room once more. Thank you for your confidence. Together, we'll embark on the next chapter, one defined by collaboration, growth, and unwavering standards. The crowd dispersed, leaving me alone with the gavel's echo. I placed it down gently. Power felt different in permanence, less frantic, more purposeful. As I walked out into the corridor, I passed Prescott's and Elena's former desks, now repurposed by new talent. I thought of their journeys, reminders that leadership isn't inherited, it's earned. Back at my office, I lit my desk lamp and typed a final email to the company. Today marks a new era. Thank you for your dedication. Let's build the future together. I hit send and leaned back, the city skyline sprawling behind me like a tapestry of possibility. I had played the game, checkmated the threats, and emerged victorious. Yet the true challenge had only begun, to lead with authenticity and vision. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications.